Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Houghton, and I am a lead consultant from Telstra Purple based in Melbourne, Australia. My socials for LinkedIn and Twitter are up on the screen if you'd like to connect with me. I love connecting with people all over the world who have similar interests to mine. I'm an application developer who mainly works with Angular and .NET. And recently, I've been learning quite a bit about cloud computing, specifically with Azure, but also a little bit of AWS. But I was surprised by how much you could do with JavaScript in the cloud. So I decided to create this talk for all of you. So thank you for having me today, and I hope you enjoy. So what is the cloud? When people first hear about the cloud, especially if they're not familiar with the technology, they are often unsure what it means. They might think it's some mystical, magical thing floating around in the air like a real cloud. But the cloud refers to software and services that run on the internet instead of locally on your computer. So really, it's a server somewhere else, usually in a big data center. And the concept that cloud providers give us, such as Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud, is that you can rent those servers, rent the space on them, and only pay for what you use, scaling automatically based on your business needs, while they manage the physical infrastructure. So it's kind of like renting a house or renting a piece of land and building a house on it, depending on what kind of cloud computing you're working with. And there's different levels of control over how you can manage that property. So really, there is no cloud. It's just someone else's computer. And what is JavaScript? JavaScript is not Java, despite the name, but it's a scripting language. And it's a language that allows you to implement complex features on web pages. And my first experience working with JavaScript was during university. And I didn't learn any sort of JavaScript during my university degree. And when I started a job, one of my internships, I got there and they said we were going to be using the main stack, which is Mongo, Express, AngularJS at the time, and Node, which is all JavaScript-based frameworks. So they handed me this book, and after reading it and trying to understand what the heck a closure was, I was partnered with a senior developer to do web development. And I've been using JavaScript throughout my career ever since, focusing mainly on web development with JavaScript. And traditionally, JavaScript has always been for the web. It was created in 1995 in just 10 days by Brendan Eich, who worked for Netscape. It was created as a scripting tool to manipulate web pages in the Netscape Navigator browser. And it was soon after standardized and took off to become the most popular client-side programming language, with today 97% of the web using it. However, JavaScript is much more than a client-side programming language. Scott Hanselman, who is a partner program manager at Microsoft, and some may say a tech influencer, even went so far as to say that he proposes JavaScript is actually an operating system. And this quote comes from his talk, JavaScript, the Cloud, and the Rise of the New Virtual Machine, which I would highly recommend checking out because he goes down into the more of the history of JavaScript and shows some really cool demos of awesome stuff that you can do with JavaScript. And he has a lot of other great content on YouTube, on Twitter, a bunch of blog posts. He even has a code talk going now, which is code-based talks on TikTok. But anyways, what he's saying is that JavaScript has the same characteristics as an operating system. And so it's a very, very powerful language. And so it makes sense for us to then be able to use JavaScript in the cloud. JavaScript was initially created to not only be used on the client side, but also to be used on the server side. But it didn't become popular as a server-side language until later on, with the creation of Node.js in 2009. Node.js is an open source, cross-platform, back-end JavaScript runtime environment that runs on the V8 engine and executes JavaScript code outside of the web browser. With the advent of Node.js as a server-side JavaScript programming language, it opened up the ability for us to use JavaScript in the cloud. And if you look at the major cloud platform providers today, JavaScript is supported on Azure, on AWS, and on Google Cloud. And in the words of Scott Hanselman, the cloud does not care about your language of choice. If you're looking to develop JavaScript in the cloud, there are some really awesome tools and guides out there that can help you get started and make it really easy to work with. JavaScript IDEs such as Visual Studio Code and WebStorm have extensions that let you integrate with your favorite cloud providers, access quick start templates, write and debug, and deploy your cloud applications really easily, all within the JavaScript environment. All major providers also provide a whole suite of SDKs, so software developer kits, which allow you to interact with their services in JavaScript. So their SDKs are written in JavaScript, and you can easily import them into your JavaScript applications. So let's take a look at some of the things you can do with JavaScript in the cloud. So first, we're going to take a look at Azure Functions, which is a serverless solution that is provided through Azure and the other cloud providers. So AWS has serverless functions as well that are called Lambda functions. Google Cloud has cloud functions. But a serverless solution means that the cloud provider takes care of the provisioning of the infrastructure for you and does all the auto scaling, and you generally build based on your consumption. So it's really just a piece of code out there in the cloud. But they have all these tools and templates to support JavaScript for these serverless functions. So what I have now on the screen is a serverless function that I have set up earlier, which is using just their JavaScript template. So it's a function that is executed with a HTTP trigger, which means when an HTTP call is made, it'll then execute this function. And the body of what happens when the function is executed is written in JavaScript, and that's all supported in the cloud. So we can, and this is in Visual Studio Code, and I have those tools and extensions installed to make it really easy to work with Azure. So I can actually go and look at my Azure subscriptions from within here. I'm already all signed in, so I can see my subscriptions. And this one we have on the screen, we can see it here locally, but I've also already deployed it to the cloud. So it's available on the cloud here. And I can go from within here, and it's already running. So I can actually execute the function from within my Visual Studio Explorer, or I can even run locally. I can run this one. So if I go function F5, so I have the core tools installed. So this is automatically running and building the Azure function, so I can debug it from within my IDE. So it's started, and we can execute the function by going back here, right click, and you say execute function now. And the body of the function, what it was doing was just looking for a name parameter, and it's going to print out a message saying, hello, this function worked. So let's say techno day, enter. And down here, we can see it was successful, and it says, hello, techno day, it executed successfully. So that's currently running within my IDE as a local developer experience. But because it's already hosted on here, I could run it from pointing to the Azure instance, or I can actually go to the browser, and once I deployed it, it was automatically available through this URL. It's called HTTP example. So I can just refresh this to hit that endpoint again, and it sends me the message. So it's really easy to interact through these tools, but also what we can do is we can create new ones through these tools really easily. They have really nice templates for us. So in my Azure tool here, within my Visual Studio Code, I can click on this button here to create a new function. And I'm going to do another HTTP trigger. There's different types of triggers for timers and other things as well. I'll just leave it as the default name. Anonymous access means anyone can access it. And then it automatically sets up another template using JavaScript, because I set JavaScript as a language for this project. So there's also options for using TypeScript as well, which we know is the superset to JavaScript, adding a type system on top of it that then gets transpiled back into JavaScript in the end. So you have the options there to use either one, but it sets it up with just a click of a button, which was really nice. And then I could then change to running and testing this one. And if I wanted to deploy this new one, currently it's only local. If I wanted to deploy it to the cloud, all I have to do is click this button to publish it, choose the subscription that I want, and the function app, which is the container for all the function apps. And I'm just gonna go ahead and deploy that. So now it's deploying. And if there you go, so it's starting the deployment, and in a little bit, we can see there's a spinning symbol here. That means it's working, and soon it'll pop up here on our cloud. So that's just an example of some of the tools that are really easy to use and how they have templates already ready to go for you with JavaScript-based code. But that's only just one of the things that you can do with JavaScript in the cloud. Another really cool thing, in my opinion, are the availability of all the SDKs and client libraries in JavaScript from the different cloud providers. So again, looking at Azure, because that's what I'm most familiar with, I'm going to show you one of the SDKs that I have. So let's see. So there's a feature, a service within Azure called Azure Digital Twins. And Azure Digital Twins are the next step in IoT, and it's a way to create a graph and form relationships between all of your IoT devices. So this is a cloud service and part of the whole Azure IoT solution, but they make it really easy to work with and to integrate with JavaScript if you wish. There's options for other languages as well, but this is all about JavaScript in the cloud, right? So this is a open source project that I just opened up here. And this is for their Azure Digital Twins Explorer, which creates a really cool graph. I'll show you the graph. So this is just running locally. And what this graph is showing those relationships between all the what's called the twins, which have all the features of your IoT devices. This front-end app is written in React. And you can run this query, and it's connected to your digital twin instance on the Azure cloud at the moment. And what it will do is it pulls up all these this graph relationship here. So this is all just pulling all that information. And in order to pull that information down, and you can create new relationships or add new models, it's using this digital twins JavaScript client library, so the client SDK here in the back end. And so you can do things like getting all the twins, querying the twins. You can update the digital twins, so adding in new twins, new features. There's also a really rich query API, which you can use from within here. You can add in new relationships, get models. If you look at the client definition, it's a full API to interact with those. So you don't have to change languages when you're doing more complex things like integrating with the IoT type of services, or there's another SDK that I have a project set up for us here that we could quickly look at. So this one is integrating with the cognitive search. So Azure Cognitive Search is another cloud service which allows you to add in a really rich search experience to your app. And they also have a SDK that's written in JavaScript that you can interact with to add search to your app really easily. So in this one, it just has a main function here, which is it's all just API based. So it's setting up a few queries. So we're sending these queries. This is using a rich search as well. If you're familiar with querying languages such as SQL, you would know that select star would select everything. And we're using that same thing here. So in search, we're sending in the star, and then we're sending in the options. And what that's going to do is search everything in our cognitive search, a cognitive search database. In this example, it's a set of hotels, so you can search for hotel names or anything like that. So if you have a website where people can book for a hotel, they could use this. You can also add in order by and select stuff like this by putting in the search options. So this second query is going to rate by descending. And again, this is all just using JavaScript that you could already be using in your app. So you can have a full, really powerful JavaScript app that is interacting with the cloud services. I'm going to run this really quickly so we can see what we get. And this is connected to the cloud. Oops. Sorry. Let me just pull up. How do I run this again? Node. Node run, I think. Sorry, I forgot the command for running this project. They're all different. Might just be node run. But what it would do is it spits out the search node index.js. That's right. I'm used to working with Angular where you just do ng-serve. But cool. So because it's a node-based app, you just run node index.js, which is pointing it to the entry point, which is this index.js file. And it ran those queries. So first it got the whole list of hotels. Then it did some ordering and filtering and some additional querying things. So the SDKs that are available for JavaScript are very powerful and allow you to do quite a bit of stuff. There's also, you have the ability to host static web apps. So this is a feature that's in preview at the moment. And what that means is anything that is just static content, say a blog, where it doesn't need to go out to talk to some sort of database or some sort of backend service. You can have that hosted really easily with just a click of a button on Azure. And you could have the API through Azure Functions as well, because that is all serverless. And these features are all available on AWS and Google Cloud. They might have slightly different names, but there's that vast support of things for JavaScript in the cloud. And you could also just deploy a normal app using Azure App Services and integrate with a whole wide range of all of the cloud tools. So I'm going to go back to my slides here. Cool. So we've seen how we can create very, very quickly using the integrated JavaScript developer tools, a serverless function that's all based in JavaScript. When you are first setting up a project, you can choose which language that you want, and JavaScript or TypeScript are supported. We can deploy it using those tools. We've seen examples of how there are JavaScript SDKs available that allow us to connect to the really powerful different cloud services that are out there. And there's a whole wide range of those. I would go on for hours if I tried to show you all of them. And we also heard that we can host just static JavaScript websites or deploy them into app services. There's so many things that you can do with JavaScript in general and JavaScript in the cloud. You can expand it out to your machine learning and artificial intelligence. And JavaScript can be used not only in the cloud and the desktop, but also in mobile development with React Native that we have now that is TypeScript, but turns files back into JavaScript. And also game development. The Unity's Unreal Engine is written in JavaScript, and it can even go on to robots as well. In Scott Hanselman's talk, he demonstrates a whole bunch of really powerful stuff that you can do with JavaScript, such as a complete implementation of a Linux Pentium processor written in JavaScript and compiling a C application in a JavaScript virtual machine, running in a browser, running on Windows. So you can really put all those layers in there, or even inside a Windows Phone emulator on a Windows machine. or the Unreal Engine written in JavaScript, all that gaming stuff is really, really powerful, and you can write it in JavaScript. There is a concept called the rule of least power from Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the web, that suggests that choosing the least powerful language is suitable for a given purpose. And as a corollary to that rule, we get Atwood's law, which states that any application that can be written in JavaScript eventually will be written in JavaScript. So I hope that if you're not using JavaScript yet, that you go out and learn it today, because you can use it for so many things, not only web development, you can use it for your cloud, you can use it for mobile development and high levels of computing. And you can really write anything in JavaScript, because now we can compile C++ code into JavaScript and run it in the browser. So if you are already using JavaScript, please go out and explore what you can do with it. I hope you go out and learn a bit about how you can use it in the cloud. And because the opportunities with JavaScript are endless, especially paired with the power of all the services and applications that we can use in the cloud. So thank you for having me today, and I hope you learned something. If you scan that QR code on the screen or go to the link at the bottom, you can access all the resources that I used today, including all of my slides and all the demos and code that we had a quick look at today. So thank you very much for having me, and please reach out to me with any questions on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I hope you enjoy Techno Day.